Thank you, Aqilah. First and foremost, I will explain to you guys about what is Environmental Management Accounting or EMA is about. For the definition, EMA known as the identification, collection, estimation, analysis, internal reporting, and use of physical flow information, environmental cost information, and other monetary information for both conventional and environmental decision making within an organization. Okay, next is about type of information used in EMA. For the first information is physical information or known as PEMA. PEMA refers to a company's impact on the natural environment expressed in terms of physical units such as kilograms, cubic meters, or joules. For example, kilograms of material per customer served, joules of energy used per unit product. Besides that, PEMA also is about the direct effects on the environment. And the second information is monetary information or called as MEMA. MEMA focus on the environmental aspect of corporate activities expressed in monetary units, such as measures expressed in expenditure on cleaner production, cost of fines for breaking environmental laws, investment in capital projects that improve the environment, and monetary values of environmental assets. So we can see that MEMA seems to be about the impact of the environment on the firm's financial performance. And it can be underlined that a key difference in MEMA and PEMA is the type of measurement used and information resulted to, namely financial and non-financial measures and information. Okay, here is the 5 stages of EMA. The first one is commitment and policy. Top management commits to environmental improvement and establish the organization environmental policy where the policy is the foundation of EMS. EMS is Environmental Management System. Second is planning. Part of the planning stage is devising an action plan for meeting the targets. This includes designating responsibilities, establishing a schedule, and outlining clearly defined steps to meet the target. A target is a detailed, quantified requirement that arises from the objective. The third one is implementation. Steps in the implementation stage include documentation, following operating procedures, and setting up internal and external communication lines. An organization also follow through with the action plan using the necessary resources such as human and financial. The first one is evaluation. A company monitors its operation to evaluate whether objectives and targets are being met. If not, the company takes corrective action. And the fifth stage is review. Top management reviews the result of the evaluation to see if the EMS is working. Management determines whether the original environmental policy is consistent with the organization's value. And lastly, I will talk about what benefits industry gain by applying EMA. The first benefit is the ability to be more accurately track and manage the use and flows of energy and materials, including pollution or waste of volumes, types, and fate. The second benefit is it provides more accurately and comprehensive information for the measurement and reporting of environmental performance, thus improving company image with stakeholders such as customers, employees, government, and finance provider. The third benefit is the ability to be more accurately identify, estimate, allocate, and manage or reduce the costs, particularly environmental types of costs. And the last one is EMA help the management to develop its environment strategy for moving toward a greener corporate culture. Next, I shall pass the floor to Syaza to explain more contents about EMA.
Thank you, Farah. Now, I will continue with the EMA techniques that are useful for environmental management accounting to identify and allocate environmental costs. There are 4 techniques, which are the first one is input-outflow analysis, flow cost accounting, activity-based costing, and life cycle costing. Firstly, input-outflow analysis. It is a technique that records all materials inflows and balance it with the outflows with the principle that what comes in must go out. The purchase inputs such as materials that inclusive of raw materials, labor, energy, water will be regarded as 100%. the outflow which are produced, sold, stored, and the residual value or the waste of the outflow will be balanced with the amount of inflows. For example, if let's say 100 kg of materials are bought and 80 kg of them have been produced, therefore 20 kg will be considered as residual value that can be sold as scrap and disposed as waste. By doing this, the company can put the limitation of the waste and optimize the usage of the useful materials. Both in terms of physical quantities and monetary terms, the business can focus on the environmental cost. Secondly, flow cost accounting. This technique not only focuses on material flow but also the organizational structure. It will make the material flows transparent by looking at the physical quantities involved, their cost, and their value. The material flows will be divided into three categories. Firstly, the material values and costs applied to the materials which involved in the various processes. Second, the system values and costs are in the in-house handling costs which are incurred to maintain a material. For example, personnel costs and depreciation. Thirdly, the delivery and disposal values and costs refer to the cost of flows leaving the company, such as transport costs or cost of disposing waste. The value and cost of these flows will be calculated, and the company can reduce the quantity of materials which at the same time give positive impact to the environment and the business total cost in the long run. Moving on, the third one is activity-based costing or ABC. ABC is the allocation of internal costs based on the specific activities that give rise to the cost. In environmental context, this technique will distinguish between environmental related costs which can be attributed to joint cost centers such as incinerators and sewage plants, and environmental derived costs which tend to be hidden on general overheads such as depreciation and personal salary. For example, one activity at a gym is washing towel. Washing towel can give rise to cost because it requires staff to collect, delivery, wash, and pick up the towel. Therefore, the environmental costs relating to this activity may be high, such as the energy used to power the washing machine. Thus, the company can take the initiative to limit the use of towel. By limit the use of towels from 2 pieces per customer to 1 towel per customer only. This will implement the environment-friendly system that can reduce the impact on the planet as well as improve the relationship with the customers. The last one is life cycle costing. This technique requires full environmental impact. Therefore, all costs that arise from production will be taken into account from the beginning to the end of the cycle. For example, purchase costs, production costs, maintenance costs, and disposal costs. For instance, if the company is used different type of packaging for product of different purpose, even the product is the same, the company will use extra time to do the packaging and it cause the cycle to be longer. To prevent this, the company should use standardized packaging to reduce time for packaging and eventually reduce the environmental costs related to the cycle. That's all from me. I'll pass to the next presenter, Aqilah.
Thank you, Syaza. Now we will look at the environmental costs, an example of a company that implements them in its organization. Environmental costs can be categorized as follows. Environmental prevention costs. It is the cost of activities undertaken to prevent the production of waste. Next, we have environmental appraisal costs. It is the cost incurred to ensure that the organization complies with regulations and voluntary standards. Besides, we also have internal failure costs. It is the cost incurred from performing activities that have produced contaminants and waste that have not been discharged into the environment. Last but not least, we have external failure costs, which are the costs incurred on activities performed after discharging waste into the environment. Toshiba Group adopt environmental accounting approach to promote environmental management by collecting accurate data on investments and costs for environmental conservation initiatives and using this data to make managerial decisions based on investment effects and cost benefits. There are 6 categories of environmental costs implemented by Toshiba Group, which are: the first one is the business area costs to reduce the environmental reduction, such as pollution prevention costs, global environmental conservation costs, and resource recycling costs. Second is upstream or downstream costs such as collection and recycling of end-of-use products to prevent adverse environmental impacts. Then, Toshiba also incurred admin costs to prevent adverse environmental impacts, for example, tree planting or cleanup activities. And then we have public relations costs, which support local environmental activities and donations. Toshiba Group also adopt R&D costs, such as technical development for SCPs are incurred to comply with environmental policies. Lastly is the environmental damage restoration costs, which involve recovery of soil pollution, which represent external value costs. Now I will pass you over to Nurin Jazlina.
Thank you, Aqilah. Now, I will continue with the definition of climate change. According to the United Nations, climate change refers to the shift in temperature and weather patterns in the long term that are caused by burning fossil fuel like coal, gas, and oil. It is a global phenomenon of climate transformation due to human activities. These activities generate 4 key greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbon, and methane. It leads to global warming as they act like a blanket wrapped around the earth and trap the sun heat. Greenhouse gas occur naturally, but human activities have increased the concentration in the atmosphere. Climate change affects many aspects of human lives. There are various factors that cause climate change. First, cutting down forests or deforestation. Earth lost the beneficial effect as forests absorb carbon dioxide. By cutting them down, it will limit the ability to keep emissions out of the atmosphere. Next is generating power, including electricity and heat. Most electricity is still generated by burning fossil fuel, which produce carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. Transportation, such as cars, planes, and ships, become major contributors of global warming due to combustions of petroleum-based products like gasoline. And last but not least, manufacturing industry use fossil fuels to produce energy from machines, which contribute to greenhouse gas emission. Human activities have led to increase in global temperature, rise in ocean level, and extreme weather like storms and droughts. Therefore, how can we relate environmental management accounting (EMA) and climate change in the Malaysian manufacturing sector? Climate change is considered to be a material issue that can have financial consequences for most companies. Based on the Department of Statistics Malaysia, manufacturing sectors contribute 23% of GDP in 2017 that increased economic growth, but it had negative impacts on the natural environment. Malaysia ranked 50 in the world that had the worst air quality in 2021 according to the Air Quality Index. In traditional management accounting, environmental cost is not considered as significant, which led to development of EMA to overcome the weaknesses. EMA plays a vital role in developing decision-relevant information, including costing, reporting, and disclosure of impact as the impact of climate change become more visible. EMA will affect the flow of money towards cost saving and sustaining competitive advantage and climate-friendly investment. Company risk profile and their strategic positioning are directly affected by global and local changes in temperature, extreme weather, and resource availability. Scientific warning has been released that climate change will have a significant impact on sectors such as water, agriculture, forestry, health, and tourism. Thus, organizations need to continue to measure climate change vulnerability and adaptive capacity to improve environmental performance. Let us dive deeper on the relationship of EMA to other environmental management initiatives. EMA can be described as a broad set of principles that consist of general energy flow and cost data which can be implemented by specific environmental focus. EMA data can be utilized for most types of decision-making routine within an organization. Some examples of environmental initiatives that apply EMA include design of environment and pollution prevention and cleaner production. Design of environment is a method that is used particularly in engineering, business environment and technology to reduce waste generation and maximize the usage of byproducts at the end of life cycle. This approach going beyond just the use of recycled materials or proper packaging or disposal. It uses an approach on life cycle thinking to improve product quality and cost as well as reducing environmental impact through technology innovation. There are 5 aspects need to consider under design of environment approach including material and extraction, production, transport, distribution and packaging, use and end of life. An organization can design for the environment by monitoring environmental impacts and costs associated with each product or process and minimizing energy expenditure by using materials that are not dangerous for the environment. Lastly, pollution prevention and cleaner production. Pollution prevention can be defined as cost-effective practice that prevents pollution from happening rather than incur costs to control. It reduces the amount of toxicity of potentially harmful substances at their sources prior to generation, treatment, offsite recycling or disposal. The main aim is to prevent organizations from suffering high costs and liabilities to cleaning up the pollution. This approach is usually implemented by agriculture and industrial sectors. Pollution prevention protects the environment by conserving and protecting natural resources while strengthening economic growth through more efficient production in industry. Cleaner production refers to the sustainability concepts such as zero emission, eco-efficiency and green procurement to manage environmental impact of business processes by reducing waste, efficient use of energy as well as minimizing environmental damage. It will lower production costs and reduce long-term liabilities which companies may face in the future because of pollution. Waste handling and charges, raw material usage and insurance premium can often be cut along with potential risks. And now I will pass the floor to Ain.
Thank you, Nurin. Next, I will proceed with initiative taken by government to tackle climate change. Here is attached an excerpt from an article entitled "The Laws Relating to Zero Emissions in Malaysia." In this article, it said that Malaysia suffered 3 consecutive days of heavy downpour, persistent rain on an unprecedented magnitude, affecting 8 states in December 2021. The country suffered estimated loss of Rm15 billion to the Malaysian economy, about 70,000 victims and most tragically 54 deaths and 2 people missing. Climate change, according to experts, is one of the primary reasons for the flood. Dr. Rienjawa, an environmentalist, believes that the flood is a clear example of an unpredictable weather event as a result of excessive carbon emission. Climate change, particularly global warming caused by carbon emissions, has clearly contributed to this calamity and many others throughout the world. As a result, individuals responsible for combating this ever-growing global crisis must take the required corrective measures, including the introduction of legislation governing climate change. So here, we will look into the rules that govern carbon emissions in Malaysia. The first one is the Environmental Quality Act 1974, which is the major piece of law in Malaysia that controls environmental preservation and conservation. Section 21 and 51 of the EQA 1974 give the minister in charge of environmental protection the authority to create regulations defining acceptable conditions for the emission of environmentally hazardous substances and pollutants, as well as regulation prohibiting the emission of any gaseous matter in the environment. Next is the Environmental Quality Clean Air Regulation 2014, which states that any owner or occupier of a premise involved in any activities or industry listed in the first schedule of of the Clean Air Regulations must comply with the Clean Air Regulations. The Clean Air Regulations also includes provision for the installation and monitoring of an air pollution control system, as well as offences and penalties. The Clean Air Regulation require owners of buildings involved in relevant activities and industries to be prudent in their operation in order to comply with the Clean Air Regulations, which in effect decrease the release of air pollutant, including carbon, into the atmosphere. In addition to the foregoing, the Minister has set regulation governing the emission of pollutants from various types of vehicles, such as motorbike and cars powered by gasoline or diesel engines. The aforementioned regulations state that the engine of such vehicle must not produce pollutants in excess of the prescribed limit. Compliance with these standards by vehicle makers will, in effect, lower the number of vehicles in Malaysian roads emitting dangerous level of pollutants, resulting in reduction in carbon emissions by Malaysian automobiles. The Renewable Energy Act of 2011 encourages the development of power from renewable resources by instituting a feed-in tariff structure that pays feed-in holders a premium for each unit of electricity generated from renewable resources. It is one of the government's prominent attempts to encourage corporations to engage in renewable energy generation, shifting away from unsustainable fossil fuels, which are unquestionably one of the most significant sources to carbon emissions and global warming. Malaysia is a signatory to the Paris Agreement on the global basis. The Paris Agreement is an international climate change deal. Malaysia has pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, of which 35% is unconditional and the remaining 10% is conditional on receiving climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building from industrialized countries. Regarding the Paris Agreement, Malaysia has demonstrated its continued commitment to environmental preservation by upgrading its nationally determined contribution as follows. A. Enhance the unconditional reduction intensity by 10%, and B. Broaden the coverage of greenhouse gases to include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. Furthermore, in accordance with the Paris Agreement, industry leaders such as Petronas and Shell Malaysia have demonstrated their commitment to achieving the net zero carbon emission goal by, among other things, improving energy efficiency, providing low carbon energy, developing emissions reduction technologies, and reducing hydrocarbon flaring and venting. Petronas and Shell Malaysia's activities will ideally serve as a model for other corporations, particularly those in the oil and gas industry, to take action on climate change. Environmentalists have repeatedly advised us that suitable climate change mitigation measures must be implemented immediately. We can no longer disregard these warnings, and we must act to avoid climate-related calamities like the 2021 Malaysian floods from occurring again. The writers of the article expect that Malaysia will take climate change more seriously by passing more efficient legislation to limit carbon emissions and enforcing such rules properly. That's all from me. I'll pass to Syaza to conclude this presentation.
Thank you, Ain. As for the conclusion, Environmental Management Accounting EMA is specialized to focus on things such as cost of energy and water, the disposal of waste, and effluent. Therefore, it is a need for us to understand the risks and impact of organization activities, including the production process, will actually give impact to the environment. This happens because of the use of energy, water, disposal of waste that cause the climate change to happen. With the implementation of EMA, the company can identify, analyze, and manage, and reduce the costs that are related to environment that will benefit the company in terms of cost and to the environment as well. That's all from us. Thank you for your time.